Thank you to everybody for joining today. My name is Carol Peters, and I'm proud to serve as the president and CEO of United Way Next. I'm a former United Way professional who served in Illinois for 5 years as a CEO, and just am thrilled to have the opportunity to see all of you and connect with you here through United Way Next. Many people don't know that our United Way Next is funded through our membership by individuals who represent retirees, alumni, current staff, as well as local United Ways who choose to invest dollars in our organization so we can continue to support across the network. And we do everything that we do in partnership with United Way Worldwide, as well as the local state associations. So we see ourselves as a piece of the puzzle, and we strive to be a resource to all of you. So whether you're a retiree, an alumni, or current staff, we're glad that you're here to join us and excited about our topic today. So last year, we started our wellness series intentionally to attract people to a different area of work and thinking about yourself personally and professionally and what it is that maybe you need or would like to do differently in your life. And we've had several sessions about burnout prevention, ways to really honor yourself and where you are. And today's topic is about giving your best yes, knowing when to say no. So we are thrilled to have Kerri Strauss, one of our United Way Next board members, a United Way alumni. She's currently serving as an interim for a nonprofit organization as part of her experience in the Interim Executive Academy and the work that she does there. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Kerri and let her give you a little more about her, share a little more about herself, and then kick off this great session. So thanks, Kerri, for your leadership and your willingness to speak today.
Thank you, Carol. It's so good to be here and to be with all of you. I love that we have all carved out this time to get to be together. I think this is so important for United Way Next to do a wellness series. I think that it's if we don't prioritize it, it's something that kind of gets put to the back burner. And so just to take this time to be able to discuss, this is going to be a very informal session. I have 3 different times that we'll be going in and out of the main sort of presentation, so to speak, because I really want this to be more interactive and get to really, have our time together to get to talk and to help one another. And if each of us can take away at least one thing out of today, I see that as a win. So I'm really excited for our time together and to be prioritizing wellness. And so, yes, again, thank you to Carol and United Way Next for this opportunity. As Carol said, I am a board member of United Way Next. I just came on the board this year. I'm really excited to get involved in the United Way Next organization, doing fantastic work and really just helping to move the mission forward. Give a little bit of my background information for you related specifically to United Way that I know a lot of you are either currently working for or retired. So I got my start with United Way of Berks County as an intern when I was working on a 900-hour internship for my master's degree in social work. And so in Reading, Pennsylvania, I did the internship, graduated from college, from Kutztown University, and then was hired as their volunteer center program manager. So I did that for 3 years before my family relocated to northeastern Pennsylvania. And at that time, I reached out to the United Way of Bradford County that was all volunteer run. And I said I was looking for a part-time job, and they actually let me design my own job description. So I was the first hire, first staff, and served as the executive director of the United Way of Bradford County for 10 years before I relocated again to the center part of the state and now live in Center County, State College, Pennsylvania. And I started a consulting business. And as Carol said, through that, I also do interim work. So I highly recommend, if you haven't already been connected with the Third Sector Company and the Interim Executives Academy, and also the Board Chairs Academy. I highly recommend both of those experiences. And so I've served as 3 different interims now. I'm currently serving this past year as the Interim Executive Director for the Editorial Freelancers Association. It's actually based out of New York City. So I travel to the city from Pennsylvania about 3 or 4 times a year to meet with the rest of the team in person, and otherwise we work virtually. And then I also still keep my consulting business on the back burner and do some, workshops and presentations like this on topics that interest me. So that's a little bit of my background and involvement, and just, really looking forward to our discussion today. So feel free to type in the chat any questions along the way. And like I said, we'll kind of go in and out of the presentation 3 times after each of the prompting questions as well. So I'll do a share screen, and if somebody could give a thumbs up that you can see the PowerPoint, and I have to click it into full view. There we go, on the full screen that you can see that okay? Excellent, see some thumbs up. Great. So, yes, really excited for wellness. I hope you're here to learn about giving your best yes. This is a topic that I've really found to be very fascinating. We all juggle a lot in our lives every day, and I think it's important to be able to take pause and realize when we need to say no. I love that Carol included that somebody had registered for this or wanted to register for it and then realized, like, wait a minute, I already have too many meetings today. I'm feeling overwhelmed. I need to say no and not participate in this Zoom for today. So that's an interesting one where it's like, how do we best balance this to not just say yes to everything, but to really say what is our best yes. And so, yeah, really excited for our time on a wellness series and for how to give our best yes. This is my contact information. If we're able to share out the presentation, I have my email address on here as well, if anybody wants to reach out to me directly to continue our conversation afterwards. So in a world filled with so many commitments and obligations, we all do deserve a break from time to time. And so no matter what phase of life we're at, no matter what stage, no matter how hectic our day is, it's important to take care of ourselves. And so again, really excited for our time here today. And so a big piece to this, how to say no and give your best yes, came out of burnout prevention. And so this was the #1 question that I would get as follow-ups to what was a burnout prevention series that I had done 2 years ago. And so really exploring, how is it that I can say no to someone, be it family or work, when they're asking me to take on something else. And so this really did come out of a burnout prevention. And I'll be talking a little bit about burnout during today's session also. So, the keys to preventing burnout and managing one's time and not taking on more and more when our plates are so full. We're all juggling a lot in our lives, from work and family, exercise, household chores, other commitments. And so learning how to say no can be a very impactful way for our overall wellness. And when we feel like we can't take on anymore, knowing that we can't do it all, or at least that we can't do it all well, is like, how do we manage that? And so I'm going to start with our first prompting question, which is, I have a hard time saying no. And so I'm curious to see where everybody's starting at today. And how do you feel about that? Do you have a hard time saying no? Is that a yes, no sometimes? Or you could even put in the chat if you want to add any comments to that to elaborate. And this is going to be the first stop so that we can see each other again. And then Caitlin, I guess we'll be able to see the survey results once everybody's weighed in. And I don't see any in the chat yet, but I guess if anybody is comfortable, oh, sometimes. And yes, we're tied at 45%. And only 9% of people said that they have a hard time saying no. So that's really interesting. Honestly, I'm a bit surprised to see the yes and the sometimes tied. I kind of suspected that most people were going to say yes at a hard time saying no. Does anybody want to share anything related to that with that question? Or if you're a person who says like, no, I don't have a hard time saying no, if you would want to like unmute yourself or put in the chat any response to that? Or if you're like floored about the poll, if you thought it was going to be like way more saying yes instead of the sometimes. Okay, I'm seeing a couple of comments now. Oh, the fear of missing out. That's a good one. Erin said, yeah, not wanting to miss out. That's definitely common. Totally depends. Strong in some circumstances, but want to please in other situations. Yes, Doris, I definitely see that. And getting much better at it, this retirement phase of life, Barbara says. So that's an important one that, maybe in the past we've each experienced problems saying no. And as time goes on, we realize, you know what, life is short and I don't always have to say yes. There's some more comments about being a control freak and feeling like you need to be sure that if things are done right, you have to step up to do them. And so delegation, that's a very important one that I often hear. And being a helper and a fixer, so hard to say no. I hear that, Jessica. Don't want to miss an opportunity, heart for the cause. That's another good one too. And that looks like it's another Jessica. You're all involved with nonprofits. You care about what you're doing. You have that compassionate heart. And yeah, you don't want to say no to people. You just want to fix all the problems of the world, as I know I have always wanted to do. So to saying no to that does make it to be a challenge sometimes. We're going to explore today though. And let me just see if there's any other, oh, perfectionist, striving for efficiency, worked hard for the value of my time. Great. And learning to say more because heading for a serious burnout after 4 years of not saying no. That's great. Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that, Shanna. Terrific. So that's really important because this all ties together when we're talking about overall wellness. And I'm so glad at all the comments that everybody shared, because I feel like just in that couple of minutes here in the chat section, we've covered a lot of like the issues that come out of this. So like if we don't say no for long periods of time, what does that do? And how does that take a toll on our bodies and affect other people as well? And you know, to prioritize that, the boundaries, the fear of missing out, these are really, really great. I love all the comments that everybody shared. Thank you. So I'll hop back in. And if somebody could just do a thumbs up that you can share you can see okay, thanks, the full screen. Great. So to touch on burnout, so really, what is burnout? According to the World Health Organization, burnout is a syndrome conceptualized as resulting from chronic workplace stress that has not been successfully managed. And I think that's a key here when we're discussing is that there can be resources and ways that we can manage the stress that always comes to us in life. Like nobody has a stress-free life. There's not a single person that doesn't have any stressors. And whether that's from work or family or the combination of that, it's everybody has stress. But then some people have enough resources to manage that stress, or they have enough people in their life to be able to help them to manage that, or maybe some of the skills that they can to like delegate that out. And so it's just important to recognize kind of where that term burnout comes from and what that may mean to us with our overall health. And so we've all felt like this, you know, in the past, or maybe you feel like it now, like you're running on E, and just how to not get to that point, I guess, of truly being on E. And so, as I mentioned, the strengths and or I'm sorry, not the strengths, the stress outweighing the resources. This is a really fun diagram that I like. In the bottom left corner, really highlights like when the demands of a job or family or even that fear of missing out outweigh the resources to cope. That's when burnout is likely. And so I think this is an interesting concept to look at it, that it's not like we all can be without burnout or that we all can be without stress, but it's a matter of kind of looking at that scale of like offset and like when the demands outweigh the resources to be able to cope. And so we can all add more resources into our toolbox to be able to help us to cope. And this is a quote I've especially loved. I'm sorry, the bad news is time flies, and the good news is you're the pilot. And that's Michael Altshuler. And this is a terrific way, I think, to look at life and like framing that positivity that comes from not feeling that sense of burnout and the outweighing of the resources, is that we are the ones who get to decide what we do with our time. Truly, we may feel like other people are the ones too, and sometimes we have family pulling on us and friends and work and trying to feel like we're doing everything for everyone else. But at the end of the day, we all have the same amount of hours in the day and days in the week, and we all get to decide how you know we want to be the pilot of our life. And so I think that's a good way to kind of reflect on like putting this into perspective, that we have a choice that we can make. And if we're not happy with the way things that are going now, or ways that we can improve or add to our toolkit of ways to help with those resources, that we're the ones who get to decide that. And so this can be a big key. So my second question is, how do you feel when you say yes, when you should be saying no? And I had a couple options here, like guilty, sad, or mad, but please feel free to put other in the chat as well. And realizing that we could also have probably included multiple there, like some people may feel guilty, sad, mad, and a combination of other things. So really looking to, again, have some discussion here on how that makes you feel when you are the one to, if you have been able to say no. Anxious, all of the above, frustrated with myself. Those are great comments in the chat. Ooh, another frustration. Seems like frustration is a common one that people come to. Stress, all the above plus anxiety. And definitely anxiety is on the rise as more people's stress is on the rise. All the above. Learning to say more because I was headed for serious burnout. Did I go too far up? Okay, the results. Thank you, Caitlin. So other and mad were highest on the list. Oh, and guilty. I guess those three are tied at 32%. And only 5% at sad. That's interesting to me. I think the guilt is definitely one that's been very common that I've heard people say. Frustrated with myself when I see the calendar and all of the other commitments. Yeah, all the above. I don't know if I scrolled back too far. Caitlin or Carol, if you see others that I'm missing, I think, oh, I see the word frustrated again. Somebody included. And overwhelmed. Sometimes you want to say no, but then the same question is repeated to attend an event or be a part of something. And reluctantly will raise my hand after seeing no one else raising their hand. That's an interesting point too, Jessica. I think some of us have done that where we tried to hold back and see if others will step up. Or we hope that others will step up or step in, and then if they don't, then we do. That can lead to some frustration and being overwhelmed as well. Great. Wonderful. All excellent comments. Thank you so much for everyone putting into the chat. Before I do go back to the screen share and get into some more of these details and discussion that I had, more in the presentation format, is there anything anybody wants to unmute or raise your hand to ask or call out that you're feeling right now related to any of this? Or if you have a success story related to this? And Anna, I see that you had to step out and miss the question. So we were discussing, yep, how do you feel when you say no? And a lot of people were putting in the chat some of the ways that they feel, like overwhelmed or frustrated or sad.
Kerri, I'm just going to say that I was just in a meeting today and somebody asked for a volunteer, and I did everything in my power to keep my hand down so I didn't commit myself to something, even though in my heart I thought, ooh, I could probably do that. And this was technically outside of United Way Next, because I went and attended a meeting at the local United Way where I live in Madison, Wisconsin. And so I'll just share that nobody raised their hand. No one agreed to take on the role. And I took that as a sign of really strong women who realize they can't do it all. And I was like proud of the group without even saying a word to any of them. So I just thought I'd share that.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that, Carol. For Anna, in the chat, the refreshed and proud of myself, I wanted to call out this comment, and Anna, you don't have to specifically speak if you don't want, but what that may mean for other people. So it's the opposite take on when most people feel maybe, upset that they said no, like to actually be proud of yourself for saying no. And so I'm glad that you put that comment in there, Anna. That's interesting. And remember, as Erin commented, remembering that I want to have something left for my family helps me feel better about not saying no, especially like at work. That can be an instance. And I know other comments that were related to like the not getting to the point where being burned out. And then because you didn't say no for so long, then it's to the point where it's like now you have to take the time because you didn't initially prioritize that. So yeah, these are all complicated things. Maybe a sign that it doesn't need to be done, and it feels difficult to say no when you work for a nonprofit and you know that everyone's wearing many hats too. Exactly. But we all need to be here for each other. And to really prioritize the work-life balance issue too. It's something I've heard talked about so many times, but very rarely implemented. And so to get to really actually play out the work-life balance, I think is going to be a key. So I'm going to go back to a screen share to try to share some more of these tips and insights. So how we feel we should be saying no. Thank you, Caitlin. Not sure. There we go. So the guilty, sad, mad, other, we had a lot of other comments on that. So why you should say no in life. So this is in general, you know, kind of to say yes to something grander. This is truly what I believe, that when we're saying no, you know, to even our family and friends, that this can be, that it could be because it's a part of something that's a much grander goal that we have. And you know, I kind of, I guess I'm going to share a story about what I thought that this really means as part of like a deeper yes, because I think this story like really illustrates more on a personal level, you know, and is kind of like a basic example of what that might mean. So saying no for a deeper yes, and an example that I'm going to give is that let's say that you decide you want to try to lose some weight, which is something that I recently did. So this is a very fresh example for me. So I know my weaknesses when it comes to food is candy and ice cream. And so when my husband asked me if I want to go for ice cream, I had to pause and think about it first, weigh my options, so to speak, and then decide, no, I would not like to go for ice cream, because my deeper yes is my commitment to my weight loss. So this is just a very basic example, but it's how yes to one thing can actually mean no to another. And so you get the point that it's kind of the grander yes that's out there. Ultimately, too, saying no can lead to less stress, because then you don't get into this cycle of like, I should have said no and I didn't. And now maybe my self-worth, you know, I look down on because of that decision that I made, and that I didn't have boundaries that can help me lead to balance. And so I think these are all ways that that we can look at that in terms of our long-term planning and what's really important. I'll say not just in life, but then also in work. And so the I'm sorry, the slide's not advancing. There we go. The next slide here really focuses more on this related to workload. And as I mentioned, the overall work-life balance that's at work, and being able to set these priorities for ourselves and for others. Again, the boundaries and the long-term planning. But the way that this plays out in work, and Carol, you kind of already alluded to this with the meeting that you were describing earlier today, but the fact that when at work, we often maybe have a harder time saying no because we feel like we don't have the control to be able to, like, how could we possibly turn down our boss, so to speak, or that we feel like we're going to let down our team members. But the reality of this, and the framing that I like to think of this is kind of like taking that time to say, well, if I say no to this project, or if I don't say no to this project, what kind of impact is that going to have? If I don't have boundaries on this, what kind of impact is that going to have on myself, on my team, on the rest of the projects that I already committed to? So a really good way for this, especially with nonprofits, is most nonprofits have a really amazing strategic plan that outlines the specific priorities, the projects and programs, hopefully down to like the tasks that need to be done. And so when these things pop up from time to time, and you find, oh, I just have to do this and do this and do this, these like say yes to this, say yes to this, say yes to this. It's like taking that pause sometimes, step back and say, well, wait, how does this fall into the organization's strategic plan? How does this fall into the priorities that were already set? And that if I actually just start saying yes to everything else, that I'm actually not, you know, I'm saying no to the things that we initially set out to say are a priority. And so I think just framing that sometimes can be enough to say, and maybe it is, maybe there's an instance where it is an emergency, it is something that the organization has to address or that you have to address, but just recognizing that that means that you can't do it all. And so if you're going to say yes to one thing, then what are you saying no to, and vice versa? And that all, I think, ties in, especially to that long-term planning, and I think especially to at work. And so there's a lot of, you know, very specific reasons, I think, why we need to say yes, both in life and at work. And this overall stress management, again, I like to reflect back on the avoid, alter, adapt, and accept. And this can be applied personally and related to work. And so some of the like saying no to a task can be like, how would I adapt instead? So like if it is something that comes up that is an emergency that has to be addressed, what does the organization need to do to adapt to that? What does each individual team member need to do to adapt to that, or to alter the plans? Or is it possible to totally avoid what comes up, or to accept that these are the things that come up and we have to just modify and now say yes to this other project? And so I think this is an important thing to go back to and to address. and to not just jump right to the, oh, I have to say yes to everything and we do everything and that's the way that we operate. It's like, well, no, we could ask ourselves when something comes up personally or at work, like, can this instead be avoided? Can we alter it? If not, can we adapt? And if all else fails, then we need to accept. So I like that as a reminder. Some additional strategies and techniques. So strategies are things that you think about, decisions that direct other actions or plans that you want to contemplate. And the techniques are things that you do that you might improve with your practice day to day. And skills that you can, and as I mentioned, the skills and resources that we can develop. And so ways to manage stress and to work more on this work-life balance and to work more on the long-term planning. I find a daily evaluation to be very helpful, constantly looking at those short-term and long-term plans. And again, that goes both for myself and also for the organization. Always having a positive mindset. I think that this can go really far because if we spiral down in negativity, we're not helping ourselves or anybody else. It's definitely contagious. And so trying to stay positive at all times can be very helpful. And the discipline for continuing education, this one I think, is in part why we're all here today, is like, what can we do to learn and grow and to be able to realize that there may be areas that we want to be stronger at. Maybe it's a time management aspect. Maybe it's finding the right tools and technology to help us to manage more, or different ways to learn how to say no and what that might mean. And so just this overall discipline for continuing education, I look at it very broadly, like what areas through my daily evaluations, so those short-term and long-term plans, what areas do I want to improve most on? And then what do I need to get to that? And so this could be, a book, it could be a workshop, it could be a YouTube video, it could be reaching out to find a mentor. And so the continue education, I think, is a very broad way to try to address some of this in terms of some strategies for managing stress. And another resource that I added is 15minutesforme.com. This is, again, a great way to be able to look at short-term plans and spending 15 minutes and long-term plans, but spending 15 minutes of carved out time in your day. One of the tips that I got out of this was to actually build in, and it was through the 15minutesforme.com, was to build in blocks of time that I just block off as unavailable so that it's time that I spend organizing or planning out my long-term plans. And by putting that directly into my calendar, it's a way that I can kind of help to manage the craziness of like back-to-back meetings that sometimes get into the calendar to actually build in the breaks. And so I think that's a good resource if anybody's looking for something, the 15minutesforme.com. Some other techniques to turn stress into wellness. So it's generally best to avoid 2 high stress days in a row. We all know when we have like events or, meetings that we know might be stressful, or maybe it's like that monthly board meeting that you're always dreading. So like not to have high stress days that are more than 2 days in a row have been shown to significantly help people be able to manage their time and their stress. And then also generally to best to not avoid 2 days of not prioritizing the self. So if you like to go for a walk or have that, downtime built into your schedule, the block off an hour, for planning time or whatever it might be, or making sure that you're getting enough sleep. So you're not doing the things that are ultimately prioritizing self. I think it's generally found best to avoid not skipping 2 days of that. And if you try to stick with this, like, avoiding the 2 high stress days and then avoiding the not having 2 back-to-back days where you're not prioritizing yourself, that you can see some overall long-term effects with that. And then some other techniques or technology pieces that I've found to be helpful is like Microsoft Teams, as I mentioned, building in that planning time that can be really helpful in terms of some of the tools. And if people have other tools that they've used also with technology that helps to manage time, I would love to see those added to the chat as well. And then the KISS perspective, the keep it in perspective. I think this one's really good for us to remind ourselves sometimes of the big picture of the, what's really important in our short-term and long-term goals, not just for ourselves, but, for our family, our friends, and also our organization. So the overall work-life balance, how, a lot of us work with purpose, but to keep that in mind and to perform a job analysis or eliminate unnecessary work wherever we can. This I think is a really important key, especially with nonprofits too, that are often like take more things on that don't take anything away. And so if the tasks are new, projects are always being developed, new events are always being brought on, new fundraiser ideas, that's all terrific. But which ones are we going to let go of so that we don't just keep bringing on new things? We have to evolve. We have to bring on more. But to do this job analysis of like, what can we actually eliminate? Or what can we delegate to others that's either unnecessary work for us to do in particular, or if it's truly unnecessary work that doesn't even have to be done, there are things that, you know, often other people do not realize that everyone spends a significant amount of time on that if you were to stop doing, it wouldn't even be noticed. And so what are those unnecessary work items that can be just flat out eliminated? And again, going back to that essence of like how to take control and to actively manage your time. And a key, I put in exercise. I think it's really important for all of us to get up from behind the computer and be able to, you know, do a walking meeting when we can. I know I've had meetings even with some of you on this call here where, you know, it's like, let me get my hands free and go for a walk. And I know others that have done it as well. And so just getting out from behind the computer can be another key to this work-life balance and stress into wellness. Another aspect, just to touch on briefly, because the research definitely shows this related to physical and mental health, that we all need sunlight and movement. The right nutrients, what we're eating definitely affects how we feel. The social interactions that we have and evaluating, are those healthy ones for us, or are there other, you know, more healthy social interactions that we could have, and getting enough sleep. And so I think these 5 components are often overlooked when it comes to like prioritizing wellness. And so I wanted to include it as something for us all to like evaluate. How much sunlight do we get in a day? How much are we moving? What are we eating and or drinking? And are we drinking enough water even? That's, you know, a basic thing that can really help improve our day, and the social aspects and the sleep. So I think these are really important. So our third question is, I think of boundaries as, what would you say? Limits or rules that we set where one thing ends and another begins, or physical, emotional, intellectual, or time, like time boundaries, or others you could put into the chat. I'll do a stop share so we can see what's going on in the chat too. And feel free to unmute yourself if you'd rather talk than type into the chat. We'll have time at the end also to do a large Q&A. So I'm seeing saying yes creates exhaustion. It's important to build a culture that it's okay to say no. Anna, that's another great insight. I love that. So I encourage anyone and everyone, I mean, you can do this easily with your friends and family, that you need to build that culture that says no. I'm going to go back to that after because the survey, the poll might disappear. So boundaries are limits or rules that we set. 62% said that. Where one thing ends and another begins was 14%. Physical, emotional, intellectual, and time, 24%. And there wasn't any others, but we're adding to the chat. Okay, great. So back to Anna's comment about the creating a culture, especially if you're in like a leadership role, this is important that you're prioritizing that for your team, and that you're not just saying that you're setting the boundaries or saying that you're telling your team, you know, to have that work-life balance or to be comfortable enough to say no at taking on a project because maybe it would cause them to not be working, you know, on the other projects that were already set. But I think the piece that's missing and what a lot of people don't realize is that they themselves need to also then do that. So if you expect your employees to be able to set those boundaries, you also need to show those boundaries. And so like if you're sick for the day, you better not be sending emails. Like you should be sick for the day, you took a sick day, don't send emails. You know, like, because you wouldn't want your employees doing that as well, and your, you know, the team members that you work with. And so I think setting, kind of being that good role model and creating a culture of that. Something else that I found, I read in an article last week, was that giving people an out too is an important way to do that, so that you're also like, you give people an option to say no. Like you can, if you're extending an invitation for something, or gee, you know, I'd really love for you to take this project on, Diane. I know you're busy, but could you please? And then it's like, but I realize if you're busy and you, yeah, she's saying no. So like giving somebody that out though, to say like, I know that you have a lot on your plate and don't want to do this, that's perfectly fine. And to actually mean it so that somebody can say no. And then another way is like to give them an option, like, do you know anybody else who might like to? So there's different ways that I think that we can set that culture. And I love that Anna brought that up. Um, I'm be way behind on the chat. So let me take a look here and see. You guys are like great Zoom chatters. This is exciting to see. Sometimes you want to say no, but then the same question is repeated to attend an event or be a part of something and reluctantly raise my hand. Yeah. Um, feels difficult to say no when you work for a nonprofit. I think we saw that one. Yeah. Important to build a culture that it's okay to say no. I take 5 to 10 minute quiet breaks, brief meditation a few times a day. That's great. I love that, Anna. Now, I'm curious to know more about that. Is that something that you build into your schedule, like put onto your calendar, or do you set like a timer, or how do you do that?
I actually do put my little breaks on my calendar because if not, someone's going to steal that time. And it goes back to the whole thing that I've had to work really hard to value myself first.
Hmm.
And that's just part of it. And so, yeah.
So do you feel like it's something that you have over time developed more, it sounds like more skills for a more comfort level in the being able to say no or have those
Yeah.
boundaries?
I did a couple years ago, I did a like an 8-week course, and I can't remember who it was through on mindfulness.
Hmm.
And that really kind of set the stage because if I'm not if I'm not being mindful for myself, I'm not being mindful for others, and I
Hmm.
can't help others. And then just yeah, I've been doing this stuff for 26 years. So it's not that stuff. I'm sorry, the United Way stuff. And so I'm still in the network. And I've just had to learn over time that it's you know what? It'll be there. And I just got to take a break and chill and be ready because I need to be available for people. And I can't do that if I'm not available for myself.
Hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. And there's a comment in the chat from Aaron about the analogy of an airplane, which I love this one too, that you have to put on your own
Yeah.
mask first and then help others. That's so true. I love this suggestion that Jessica had about two things that I'm loving this year. No meetings on Fridays and changing meetings that used to be 60 minutes to 45 minutes and starting them at, oh, like a quarter after instead of on the hour gives an extra 15 minutes. That's amazing. I love that. And I think something that's happened too recently, kind of post pandemic, is with a lot of meetings on Zoom, they've defaulted to an hour. And I don't know if others, I'm sure others of you have been in these, like, how are you supposed to be ending one meeting and starting the next meeting? And it's like you're either leaving one early or you're late to the next one. And so we can try to build that time in. I think that that's really important. And probably I'm curious, Jessica, like these 60-minute meetings that go down to 45, I bet they're still as productive because there's that sense of urgency that you're still going to cover what you have to cover. But yet it gives everyone 15 extra minutes. Yeah, go ahead, Jessica.
I feel like it's been a game changer for a lot of the team that are meeting with me because meetings usually start at the top of the hour. And I thought about doing it 45 minutes and ending at quarter two, but it's really easy to just go over then. But if you start at quarter after, you still need to end at the top of the hour because chances are somebody will have another meeting that starts at the top of the hour. So it gives you time to fill up your water, go to the bathroom, check email, whatever.
Right.
And we
That's
still get it done.
great. Wonderful. I love that. I love that. And somebody else added 50-minute outdoor walking meetings and do not work Friday afternoons. That's a good one. I like Diane's suggestion too. Treating time as a budgeted resource has helped me say no. I plan my day every day in advance, and there are only 24 hours in a day. Exactly. I have a meeting after this. I made it 3:05 to 3:55, all doors. That's great. And something similar, scheduling 30-minute one-on-ones instead of 60s. And it's been so clear that we can make that work for discovery calls for members who are seeking support and resources. That's great, Carol. I'm glad you suggested that. I think something too, like, especially again with nonprofits and like board meetings, if you haven't implemented consent agendas, that's definitely an excellent way to like limit the amount of, you know, adults being read to instead of being able to read the material on their own, and then move right into like actual discussion so that we're utilizing time more. And that can be a way to move something that used to be 60 minutes. It actually can be 30 minutes and 30 minutes of like real discussion instead of just talking to. So that's really terrific. One thing I want to share, and I'm going to be mindful of our time. This will just be like a short kind of anecdotal story that I want to be able to share with everyone today, because I think it might be helpful. And then I'll go back to the PowerPoint, and then we'll be ending with our final Q&A. I wanted to share some of the research that I've been seeing about how it actually, like, there's a lot of studies out there that have showed that like different people have a harder time saying no for different reasons. And this one study that I found that led me to a couple of others really honed in on the fact that a lot of times it's women that have a harder time saying no than men. And you may have experienced in the workplace. And I think the research is actually showing that, and not just the workplace, I think in general too, like personally, but the research is actually showing that, and the main source I'll cite is Psychology Today, that ever since, you know, people are young, like girls are socialized to be nice, young children, girls are socialized to be nice and more in touch with others and with their own and with other people's feelings than boys are. And that, you know, there's nothing wrong with being liked, but that boys, on the other hand, are socialized to be less attuned to other people's feelings and to win. And so there's nothing wrong with wanting not to hurt anyone's feelings as a general rule, but there is something wrong when girls and women, you know, girls that grow up to be women, learn to subject their own needs to the point that they're taken advantage of, or they end up doing things that they don't want to. And I found that to be like an interesting research piece. And the other piece that coupled into that is this hedging language. If you haven't heard of this before, it's language that's meant to soften your words. So for example, if we're peers working on a project and you're talking about doing something that like I know wouldn't work, here's the hedging way that I would tell you this. I would say, hey guys, that won't work. The material it doesn't maybe have enough elasticity and it might break, versus a hedging way, which is like, hey guys, do you think that material wouldn't have enough elasticity and it wouldn't work? And I may have prefaced that wrong. So the non-hedging way is like, that won't work. I know that won't work. But the hedging way is where I'm kind of like, do you think that maybe it wouldn't work? And so you can hear the difference. And if you say it the one way, you sound more convicted to the idea. But if you say it the other way, you sound more uncertain. And if you say, you know, I don't know if maybe I won't have this time to do that project, you sound more uncertain instead of saying, like, no, I don't have time to do this project. And so the hedging and non-hedging also plays into that, both, you know, professionally and personally. And when I found that study and then realized, as I was like kind of watching myself, I realized that like over 90% of the time I was using that sort of language where I was like, oh, I don't know, maybe, instead of being more definitive. You know, not wanting to like offend anyone. And so I just thought that was like some really fascinating research that I wanted to be able to share with that. Christina, I always write my emails with hedging language and go back over and delete all the niceness before I hit send. I love that you put that in the chat. That is terrific. And yeah. Some people are laughing. Yeah, 100%. If there's other comments that were put in the chat, let me just scroll real quick to see. Oh, it looks like some great ideas with half-day summers leading up into the week. That can be critical, not just for holiday weekends, but for any time. Staff appreciation, love that. Giving your United Way staff Fridays off in June and July so they could plan for long weekends for 8 weeks straight. That is terrific. These are some really, really great ideas. Can anyone who does walking meetings talk about how that works? Doris had asked. Always taking notes on paper, notebooks in a meeting.
I can, I responded to her. This is Anna. So that time for us becomes more intentional about listening. versus what we need about note taking. So we do a lot of our one-on-ones that way. We do catching up that way, or just where you're talking through ideas that you're kind of just bantering back and forth. But that time really just becomes more quality than, hey, I need to take notes. I guess you could record it, but it's just a time that you're spending and really using the skill set of listening. Because I think so many times we're sitting in meetings and taking notes and we're not listening to what the other person is saying. And so we just really encourage that. And we live in an area where during the winter, it sucks. And so as soon as it's really nice, get outside. I mean, we take full advantage. We're like walking distance from our lake on Lake Michigan. So yeah.
That's great. I love that. Thank you for sharing that, Anna. And I see Jessica added to use voice to text to make quick notes on the phone, or bring a small notebook too. Those can be ways to do that. That's I love those suggestions too. And I think too, I've used some walking meetings in terms of more like just brainstorming sessions too. And I love the relationship building aspect that Anna mentioned, but just to really step back, like not for the detailed items, but just like the broader picture can be really, really helpful. So that's great. So let me pop back to the final. I just had a couple of slides to kind of wrap out with that I wanted to share. We were at our last question here. So great. So the next one that I had was the SOAR analysis. If you haven't been using this, a lot of us kind of grew up using the SWOT analysis. And so I really think SOAR can be more positive. It really looks at the strengths, opportunities, aspirations, and results. And to use this within the context of like when to say yes and when to say no, I think can be a really helpful tool as well. So I wanted to include that today. And the stay interviews and exit interviews, this is something I've been promoting the last year or two now. I've personally found some great results with the stay interviews. And you know, the concept of this, most people are familiar with exit interviews. So it's like, what went wrong? Why did somebody leave? You can also adapt that to like what led to the burnout, and like why did we keep saying yes to everything when we should have said no? But the stay interviews is like, what's going right, and being more proactive. Like, what should I be saying no to? What should I be saying yes to? And so what's it going to take for me to stay? What's it going to take for me to be happy, healthy, productive, you know, member of my family, of my, you know, organization that I work with, wherever it is that you are in life. I think that this exit interview, stay interview strategy, I think really focusing on like the stay type questions can be really motivating, because it's so proactive in terms of like, I don't want to get to the point where I'm at an exit, where I'm at a burnout, where I'm done, I can't do this anymore. So instead, it's like creating the what would it do to not just stay, but to also thrive. And so I wanted to add that as a nice visual. And so that's all the material that I had for today. I'm really curious, our last piece, you know, what's standing out to you, any sharing or Q&A that anybody wants to do. And I'll stop a screen share that we can see each other as well. You can feel free to type into the chat or unmute. We're at 3:50, so we have a couple of minutes. If anybody does want to hop off for any next meetings, they can, but I would love to hear any other like tips and tricks and comments and suggestions that anybody has. Like I said, feel free to unmute and talk or add to the chat.
Yeah, one thing that I wanted to mention is that there's also, according to internal controls and separation of duties and stuff like that. So there are things that for, you know, various sources of government funding that an organization needs to have in place to, you know, avoid the burnout and avoid that. And I know for my organization, it started very small and then went to rapid expansion. So it went from like 2 people to 5 to 10 and now almost 40. And so there is that mentality still of like, oh, Bob will do it, or oh, Susan will do it, or because they've always done. And it's like, and so I've really internally in the organization be like, but does it make sense? Yeah, Bob will do it, but does it make sense for the senior program manager to be doing a monthly report for a project that's so far down the chain? Like, it's like, yes, they will say yes, they will do it, but is that part of the job description? Is that part of their function for the agency? And similar to having the agendas for meetings, so that way it's like, okay, here's what we're meeting, here's what we're talking about, let's stay focused. Structurally, the job descriptions, position titles, separation of duties within the organization, so that way and in nonprofits, it's very easy. Everybody does a little bit of everything. Everyone wants to say yes. Everyone wants to help. Everyone wants to care. But having that internal control structure, that government mandated framework in place, really helps avoid that burnout, as well as, there's an inherent out that it gives people, because then it's like, okay, it's like, oh, okay, you're asking me to do something, but like, is that appropriate for my title? Is that within my job description? Is that, is that the function that I am here for the organization? And is there somebody else in the organization, where their duties more align with this task than mine? And so really thinking about that and it's something that I've done where it's like, I'm not going to ask Bob to do something. I'm not going to ask Susan to do something. It's like, oh, I'm going to ask the CFO if they are able to, blah, blah, blah. And then that also reflects in internal conversations and everything, because again, nonprofits, and we want to be friendly and everything, but then it's like, oh, Albert said, this person said, Joanna said, and that's a lot different than the director of human resources said. So it's like, those are two like very different things. So yeah, I just wanted to mention that, of the internal control, separation of duties, and other like government regulated structures are there to keep the internal organization, so that way it eliminates, the need to be saying yes to things that don't belong to you.
Right. That's a great point, Joshua. And I love that you brought up even just the job descriptions, so I think within any organization, sometimes it's easy to default to like whoever volunteers for it, then they do it. And it's like some people will always volunteer for everything, or they say yes to everything, when the reality is it may not be within their realm or what they should be spending their time on. And it could, in fact, be in somebody else's job description who's not the person stepping up to do it. And so being the one, if you're not, you got to be able to hold everybody accountable for that. And so if you're in a leadership role at an organization, hopefully you're also shedding light on that. Like, is everybody working within their own job descriptions? And then too, if you have someone who's way, burdened, taking on way too many projects, and that they can't say no to things, what can be delegated out to other people? And maybe that job itself has to be broken out, or a part-time person hired, or whatever it may be. And so I'm glad that you shared that insight there. That can be really helpful. I see some
Yeah.
comments. Oh, go ahead, Josh.
Oh,
Joshua.
I was just gonna say, yeah, and it's also like you have, like, I know somebody else spoke about how they've been in with United Ways for like 26 years. And so it does get to a point where it's like, oh, if somebody knows you year two, and it's like, oh yeah,
Mhm.
you can do this task, but then it's year, 24, and it's like, no, my position is completely different now. It's like, I don't run this monthly report. You need to talk to so and so. And so it is tying, right. And if it's asking people to volunteer, and it's like, if it's everyone's job, then it's nobody's job. So really having it set to know, it's like, okay, this is what this position does, not what this person does, but here's what this position does. And to make that
Mhm.
really clear.
Right, right. And Diane's suggestion of articulating why I can't do that task and recommend the person who voluntold me to another person who might value the opportunity to grow. I think that's really important too, because a lot of times we'll default into kind of habit, like the people who do say yes to everything, or that people know that if they ask them that they will. So not just defaulting to that, but really analyzing it to see, is there somebody else who could do this? And the reality is, we all like to think we're so special that nobody else could do what we could do, but the reality is somebody else can. And so being able to bring somebody else into that fold to do that can be critical. Doris's comment about got much better non-hedging language as I've gotten older. I think I'm still nice, but I don't have time for nonsense. That I love that. And something just completely absurd, I would call out, this grant requires 80 to 100 hours of work. It is not a good fit. It doesn't make sense for me to apply. So I think, yeah, to recognizing that you don't have to be rude to say no, that there's just, it's simply put, you're prioritizing like what is the best yes. And that could be for yourself or an organization. But if you don't take the time to prioritize that and you're just saying yes, you're actually doing yourself and the organization a disservice, because if you can't fulfill it, you know, then there's no reason to just, you know, impetually just say yes. And there was another comment too. Oh, depends so much on the context. Who is the person telling you? But yeah, starting or stating the facts of why you can't, which can be as simple as I have too much on my plate right now. So I can't give this the attention that it needs. So that's great. So I hope that we've all kind of learned some things about being willing to like step up and speak out and offer others even an out, in terms of not just assuming that we all just need to keep doing more and more. At the end of the day, we only have those 24 hours like everybody else does. And so it's like, okay, if I'm going to do these other things, what things am I going to get rid of? And just really prioritizing, you know, ourselves to be the best that we can be, both for ourselves and also for our friends and family and the organizations that we work for. I really value all of your time and input and discussion today. I think the chat has been really lively. I've certainly taken a lot away from today's session. I hope you all have as well. And I'll toss this back to Carol. And thank you again to United Way Next for pulling this together.
Thank you, Kerri. This was an outstanding session, and it was clear from the engagement that everybody was really interested in the subject. I do want to call out Christina Kohler, who mentioned in the chat that she meticulously kept track of her time for 12 weeks and was able to showcase to her managers the extra 8 hours a week she was working, and they rewrote her job description. So I just want to applaud Christina, because that sometimes is what it takes to help our the leaders within to recognize that you're overtaxed on the duties and the things that you're doing, and there's a way to divide and conquer some of that work. So my takeaway from today was that stress plus inadequate resources is what creates the burnout. And that was on one of your earlier slides. And it isn't the stress that gets me, it's the inadequate resources that oftentimes, especially in nonprofit work, that I have struggled with. So with that said, I just want to take a moment to say thanks to everybody for joining today. For those of you who were not able to join, but you're listening to this conversation later, we're grateful that you registered and hope that you're finding as much value in the session as what we all have. We do have several events coming up in June that we would like to invite you to. I know many of you are local United Way staff. We do offer a United Way Worldwide Town Hall on May 30th. Some of you may already be informed of the information that will be shared there, but Alice Archibald and Maureen Grant Hayes will be speaking on revenue diversification and giving the United Way Next members a glimpse of what the revenue diversification looks like for United Way Worldwide. And then we also, I want to call out our Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Roundtable that will happen on June 17th. Jason Daniels will be the guest speaker, and the subject is centered around belongingness. And so we just would call out those events and encourage you to check out our website and see if there's any future events that you'd like to participate in. And with that said, I want to give Caitlin a shout out and thanks for her technology skills behind the scenes, keeping us in order and really taking care of the polls and all that was done today. And to our United Way Next board members who are on the call, Kerri, of course, Diane Levson, and Barbara Edmond, who joined us today. So thanks to the board leadership for supporting, and to each and every one of you for being here today. So thanks, everybody. And thanks, Kerri, for a great session.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Have a great rest of your day.